Я хотел бы предоставить слово международному эксперту, представителю отдела по ИКТ-стратегии Федеральной канцелярии Австрии, Питеру Рейчстадтеру. У него доклад как раз-таки будет по теме «Архитектурный подход в государственном секторе». Питер, вам слово.
Hello and nice good morning from my side. I was coming overnight, so maybe I have some red eyes, but I think the message and the information why I'm here is quite clear. I'm already here the fourth time, and I see how Kazakhstan and e-government architecture and everything is developing quite well, quite fast, and it's always very interesting for me to share and to talk and to listen to you, because I think out of this talk and this listening you may gain a lot. I was working for the Federal Chancellery for 15 years in the field of e-government strategy and architectural development, and since the beginning of this year I'm the new assigned CIO of the Austrian Parliament. I was asked before if we have electronic parliament yet. No, we don't have. There is maybe a next transformation step, but this experience what we have gathered in Austria and e-government maybe was a reason also why I was assigned the CIO of the Parliament. And we also were looking quite often to international experience, like mentioned before, Singapore or other countries, because many countries have good experiences. And they were often mentioning the approach also of Kazakhstan, what I learned here in the architectural councils. What I want to talk to you is about, and I mean, I don't know if you know Austria quite well. Austria is a very small country, but what is the challenge is we have 4 levels of government. So the challenge lies in these 4 levels. We have a federal level, then we have a district level, a country level, and then a local level. And upon all that is European Union. So you have different drivers, you have different people demanding different, let's call it information and classes of information, how to satisfy all those wishes and needs. Architecture, who needs it? And I think one of the main topics today, and as I was following the agenda besides security and besides service models and cloud, is for sure also architecture, but who really needs it? I want to stress this with a couple of questions at the beginning, which also should outline what I'm talking about. When we're building houses, usually we talk with architects about how the house should look like, that it is functional. I think the same approach should also be followed towards services and towards services in the governmental sector, but also in the private sector. They are following this quite well. On the other hand side, it's about the, let's call it, business requirements and also the mapping towards ICT capacities or ICT functions. And this granularity of services, which makes it possible to share services, depends and also demands a strong architectural believing and also a strong architectural approach. At least this was my experience in the past 15 years in Austria, and I also find a lot of international examples for that. On the other hand side, we often have the example of reinventing the wheel, and strong architecture also this, let's call it, basics for approaching the service model and also providing services in the world nowadays, is that we share a common approach and a common picture of how our service and how our architecture may look like. And at the end, what I want to stress shortly, this I heard just recently, I was giving a keynote speech at the academic conference in Greece, where we were talking about data silos. You have a lot of data silos in your agencies or in your organizations, and on the other hand side you're building islands. You're building islands, and there's silence and silos and islands together. Maybe it's silence, so that means the next step of a development of services may be not that encouraging or also not that positive. I have learned out of that government should more concentrate on the data and on the data quality, because out of the field of open government and also open data, a lot of those applications also can be developed outside, but therefore you need a strong architecture and also good data quality. Government, it's many influences which are also encouraging the development of e-government services. On the one hand side, there's a question for reliable data, for the question of reliable authentication, for security in the data and in the trust. On the other hand side, it must be useful for the citizen and also for the business, but also for other organizations, governmental organizations. It is a very well-driven market, and as we heard before, this shift from CapEx to OpEx world, we also following this in Austria and also within Europe quite interested, and I think in the next 2 or 3 years there may be some bigger steps necessary towards that it's getting even broader, but this journey has started, and I think this journey will go also to the next level of services. Because this food for thought comes out, and when we talk about nowadays about servers, computers, and all those technical and software skills which are coming from the past, they were giving us a good advice how to produce services and also how to use it within our service model. But I think the bottom of the iceberg is much bigger, and this is containing a lot of those soft skills and also of those dimensions which are important to generate the next future level of services, and also in the collaboration models, those models to be established together between the institutions. Because at the end of the day, and this is at least the model in Austria, it's these horizontal players coming from the different governmental levels, but it also needs the participation of business. Business in the form, as we heard before, PPP models, sometimes also used in Austria, or this idea of shared services for not only producing for the governmental institutions or organizations, but also for the next level or layer of users of services, gives us challenges that we have to define our pillars and our background and also architecture quite well. Talking a lot about services, and I was using this when I was here in Kazakhstan, I wasn't sure last year or 2 years ago, what is a service all about? Well, when I like to talk about services, I usually go back in history, and there comes a very famous and also well-known speech that not the strongest of the species is surviving, not the most intelligent, but this one most responsive to changes. When we take this speech coming completely out of another area and try to move this speech towards our governmental services, we can compare it with the, let's call it architecture of houses, or what I was saying before. When we were developing houses or architectures for houses, we were planning how many people are living down there, what kind of service level agreements we want to have, what kind of service we are going to deliver, how many people are living down there, what can we afford, and we were adding infrastructure like electricity, like plumbing, and the other side. But due to continual investment and also the demand for more people living in those houses, we need to build on, maybe a second floor, maybe some other rooms, but this only can happen if the architecture behind is following some stable approach and shows the overall approach within this topic and also with this goal to achieve. So what was the reason to use enterprise architecture, or the idea in Austria? It's a lot about talking with different stakeholders, talking with different institutions, and also to produce sustainable services. That means the development of services which are in the past mostly driven by some, let's call it silo or island services towards one institution, towards one organization. From the overall aim of Austria and the CIO role here in the Austrian ICT strategy, demanded that there is more collaboration, but also more understanding what other institutions need from me. And this understanding of other institutions was basically built upon a common understanding on architecture, on the granularity of services. That means how granular must the service be and what can we do to share those services between the institutions. The development model itself, and when we nowadays talking about cloud models and also the cloud services, is changing. It's demanding some additional attention from our side towards security, towards some new trust calculations. In the past, we were building services for a client-server environment. Nowadays, in the cloud, you don't really know where your ID is going and what kind of trust demand the cloud is giving to you, but it is a complex world into that, and therefore it was very essential also from the Austrian point of view to rely on some basic and modular pillars like those architectural blocks I was mentioning. So the decision towards an enterprise architecture in Austria and also in other countries within Europe also, as you know from Singapore, was taken in the past. And I think it is important to make this decision, or to at least identify the goals or the common goals which are inside this approach of an enterprise architecture. We were taking out of these different models which are existing besides Zachman frameworks and all the other ones, one approach of TOGAF, because this was leading us quite well. It was also leading us quite good to this, what we have achieved and how we want to develop further on. But it's depending on your legislation, on your background, on your organizational processes. Many different frameworks are existing, but at least to decide for one should be a good decision. These architectural views, which then brought together the different stakeholders and shareholders in their understanding and also in the discussion how we really can provide a service-oriented architecture. And although this term service-oriented architecture maybe looks like from 10 years ago, we were already talking about this, but it still has some truth in it. The service-oriented architecture brings you this possibility to develop further on, even not always touching the main building blocks of another institution, or also those services provided by another one need to follow your technical adaptations. The benefits for considering the enterprise architecture idea, and I only want to stress one point out of this, it's all about, and it's a lot about, of interoperability. The interoperability question, which was demanding a lot in a multicultural environment like Europe, we having different language sets, we having different processes, and therefore also establish different EID dimensions, but these interoperability questions could be easier solved with the help of applying these enterprise architecture ideas. At the end of the day, we produced a reference model. The reference model was very important to share and to start the discussions with the involved people inside. And not to understand this graphic which I showed you here, but it's completely stressing those different areas of a front office, of a back office, but also the service in between, and where you need to define your standard interfaces so that also partners from the private sector or from outside government can participate. Let me give you one small example. We're having a lot of registers in Austria, but at the end of the day, and together with European Commission, we were going towards 3 main building blocks. One of the blocks is the natural persons, the non-natural persons, and the objects, and the world is the relationship in between, is happening every day. So there's a strong belief within the architectural approach also in Austria and in other countries to reduce the data granularity and also the data sets toward this object items, and also to build upon those services. What will it provide to you? It will provide a positive impact on your interoperability between the services. Talking about interoperability started a couple of years ago within European Commission, and now we're already having European Interoperability Framework version 2. The next one, Interoperability Framework version 3, is up on the row. I was participating in writing the past ones, and what you gain out of this, also in the practical experience, we were doing projects together with our colleagues in Georgia or in other areas of Europe, like Albania, Macedonia. There's always a strong will and a strong need behind these efforts, but at the end of the day, it comes together that you meet again on the understanding of interoperability and architecture. Legislation is important, as we heard before here. Also, your legislative basis will come into place quite soon. Besides, there's a lot of discussion going on the semantical level. This is even more challenging than the technical level, because from the technical point of view, our protocols and our interaction between the different institutions is quite well defined. Bringing me to the summary, the basic elements, and what we are also following in the past years and probably also within the next 5 years in our service model development, beside the enterprise architecture, is this interoperability task between identification, that means authentication of objects, persons, non-natural persons, but also how to exchange data and valid data. European Union has provided a couple of projects which bring up these interoperability building blocks for different areas, for example, for EID, for the health sector, for the justice sector. This is just an example to give to you. I also provided you the links. Maybe there's something which you can get out of this for your work and which can help you to understand also coming from your sector this approach. And recently, 2 years ago, they started one new service, one new large-scale pilot project to harmonize these different projects, the so-called e-service initiative from European Commission. What is the general feeling? Is it the missing confidence, or is it sometimes that we don't believe or don't we trust in this approach of architecture can bring us a stable and a sustainable solution? The lessons learned out of that is it needs a holistic, comprehensive framework. And I think to establish such a comprehensive, holistic framework, like an enterprise architecture, all those things beside, will then also encourage this shift from a CapEx to an OpEx world, and will also give you probably more innovative service in the near future. Include the horizontal key enablers in the big pictures. It's not only the government, there are many other e-sectors out in the field, like the e-health, the e-business or the e-commerce sectors, and it's a shared service world. Don't think in silos and reduce the complexity. It was a big experience we have made in the past 3 years. And don't try to reinvent the wheel again and again and again. There are already good solutions out there. Sometimes it's only a question of the architecture, how you can easier share those solutions. We were following mostly in Austria the strategy coming from European Commission, but we were listening to the other experts in the field, like also those one we heard before, Singapore, but I was here 4 times already in Kazakhstan, and saw very, very productive discussions with people from here. And share the services on all those things which you have towards the different levels of government. What is our next generation, what we are looking for? Big data, how does our working place of the future look like? How do we deal with cloud services, with mobility, with bring your own device? This will give you a new challenge also in the design of your services. And at the end of the day, it's about the granularity of service, and I still believe that open government data can provide a lot of good data sets. The applications out there from those people who knows how to build apps and also services, this must be a private-public partnership, or maybe even some demand to them to develop by themselves. At the end of the day, and this slide I was producing 2003, I was hoping sooner or later we will get rid of this E or this M or this T in front of government. It's still E-government, M-government, T-government. Sooner or later maybe it's only government, and then we are talking about those services which we are using also in the private sector. Thank you for your attention, and I hope we have the chance to talk in between. I will be here till the evening, so every coffee break or whenever you have a need, please address me, come towards me. Thank you.